I think she's entitled to nothing during these proceedings. And I think the problem is no fault divorce. And I think we're not dealing with a traditional at fault divorce. We're dealing with irreconcilable differences. And I think the real answer should have been that when problems arose, a judge told them both, STFU, you are in a marriage. It is a sacred covenant.
Tim Pool was talking about the tumultuous divorce that's taking place between Stephen and Hillary Crowder. He doesn't believe that Hillary Crowder should get a dime through this divorce process. Look, I don't want to dive into it. It is a tumultuous divorce. I feel kind of weird talking about other people's private lives, but I do want to have a broader discussion about Tim Pool's views on marriage and divorce, because I think what he's advocating for is incredibly damaging, especially for a country that has a lower rate of people who are willing to get married in the first place. Now, Pool has some advice so you don't find yourself in a situation where you might want a divorce. So let's hear him out and we'll see if he makes any sense here.
Marriage has become dating. It's dating with like strings attached in the financial world after the fact. No. Don't get married if you don't get married, okay? If you don't want to get into a position where you have to file for a divorce and hire lawyers for these reasons, then don't get married.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you.
The thing is, we don't really have like the magic 8 ball. Like we don't have a way of predicting whether our marriage is going to be great, it's gonna work out. Sometimes you meet someone, you date someone, you love someone, you think it's the perfect person for you. Then you get married and things can change, especially, by the way, after having kids. A lot of marriages experience some strain after having children. Their philosophy on child rearing might actually conflict. There are all sorts of issues that might arise. An individual within the marriage might end up being physically abusive. They might be emotionally or mentally abusive. You never know. It's not like people willy-nilly enter a marriage thinking, oh, it's not a big deal, I'll just get a quick divorce and it won't be a problem. No, getting a divorce is real difficult, okay? It is time consuming, it is costly, it is awful. And so look, are there some people who don't take marriages seriously and they just enter a marriage without really considering whether the individual they're marrying is right for them? Sure, I guess. But Tim Pool seems to be against the idea of, the no fault divorces or divorces where the couple cites irreconcilable differences. Now, obviously life is way more complicated than that. And again, even if a couple like the Crowders follow the traditional conservative playbook, right? They waited until they were married to have sex. They followed their Christian values all the way into their marriage. It didn't work out. And who are we to get involved and tell them, oh, you guys hate each other. We don't agree with the reason for why you want to split up, so we're gonna force you to stay together? How is that gonna be a positive environment for children to be raised in? That is not a good situation. A household where you have two partners, two married individuals fighting each other constantly, that kind of instability in the household is actually not good for the kids. But obviously it depends. If you have irreconcilable differences, it could be so severe that again, like the environment could be incredibly toxic for kids. Plus, why is Tim Pool acting like there's this weird like prevalence of couples getting married and divorced like it's a fun walk in the park? That's actually not happening. So we've all heard that myth, right? That 50% of marriages end in divorce. That's not the case anymore, not even close. In fact, let's take a look at this graph because it shows you data from the CDC in regard to divorces in America, the divorce rate. And divorces actually decreased significantly from 2000 to 2021. In 2000, the crude divorce rate was 4 per capita during that year, but by 2021, it had fallen to 2.5 per 1,000, I'll say, so per capita. And so if this was a growing problem, if you're starting to see like a significant spike in divorces, well, then maybe we can have a conversation about what it is. Is there something happening culturally? Is there something that can be done to help support families in staying together? Sure, but that's not what's happening right now. And the idea that we should have the federal government get involved and prevent people who don't want to be married anymore from divorcing, that's gonna discourage people from getting married. I don't know if we want that either, because honestly, marriage is pretty fantastic. There are some tax benefits that come along with it. So if you're thinking about the financial benefits of being married, that's pretty awesome. You also get to live in a dual income household. That's awesome, real awesome, right? It creates more financial stability for people. So if that's something that you're interested in, marriage is great. But putting that aside, marriage is freaking awesome. If you marry the right person. And look, you never know, things could fall apart. I totally acknowledge that, and no judgment if it does, life happens. But if you are fortunate enough to meet someone who is right for you, and you live your life with them, you share your life with them, you get to come home from work every night to your best friend. It is such a wonderful thing. And we don't want to discourage people from seeking that. We don't want to discourage people from entering a marriage knowing that there are these new laws that would prevent them from getting divorced if things really start to fall apart. And if you take a look at the marriage rate, that's actually been suffering a little recently. So let's go to the next graphic here. So 60% of couples cited a partner's unfaithfulness as the top reason why their union ended. Nearly a quarter of divorces, 24% in total, cite domestic abuse as the cause of divorce. So the idea that people are just flippantly getting a divorce and they don't see it as a big deal, like any little conflict, they just want to end things. That's actually not the case. People are divorcing for some very serious reasons: lack of commitment, an abusive relationship. And I do want to go to the next video, because in the next clip, I think that Poole ends up accusing conservatives of something that doesn't really make sense. But more importantly, he's challenged a little bit, and I agree with the challenging that takes place. So let's take a look at that.
So there's an interesting phenomenon here that for some reason has emerged in this particular case, where you're seeing a lot of these traditional conservatives actually come out as full-on feminist as soon as it comes to the issue of divorce.
I don't think it's feminist at all. If you want,
but it literally
if you
is.
want to incentivize traditional marriage, like you can't put one party in a position where they get totally ripped off in case of a divorce.
You're correct. The traditional response to how you fix marriage is divorce is not allowed.
Okay, but
there's rare circumstances where a guy is threatening to murder and beating his wife and his kids, and infidelity is one of these things. These are people who I don't think those accusations are on the table. They're mostly just angry with each other and yelling at each other, and they're not getting along. That's where a judge comes in and says, you are grown adults. You will behave appropriately. You have children. Those children need functioning parents. You will treat this relationship properly, get therapy, and at the very least, if you don't like being around each other, you will be professional. And you chose this covenant.
What are you advocating for? For them to live in the same house when they don't like each other?
Yes.
That's crazy.
That is in fact crazy. And also, I just love the line of, even if you guys if you guys hate each other's guts and because of new laws you're forced to stay married and live together, just be professional about it. No, we get enough of the forced to be professional at work all day. Okay, we don't need to do that at home too. If you're unhappy and you can't stand your partner, again, that conflict is super toxic for the children that Tim Pool is saying he's concerned about. Look, I don't want to be overly critical of Tim Pool here, but Tim, who hurt you, Tim? Who hurt you? This is not good policy, and I don't know what's fueling his promotion of these policies, because if you want to increase the rate of marriage in America, which could potentially increase financial stability for people, which is a good thing, this ain't the way to go. If I knew that it would be impossible for me to get a divorce if things start to fall apart in my marriage, I wouldn't get married. And look, to be fair to Tim, he does say that it's totally fine, don't get married. He says it throughout his argument in the episode that he hosted. But overall, agree with Sean, the guest who was on Tim Pool's show. He creates content on YouTube under Actual Justice Warrior if you want to check out his content. But what he says there is totally true. It is insane to force a couple that can't stand each other to stay together and live in the same household. It's just not a good idea. It's not good for the kids, it's not good for the couple, and it just creates a super tumultuous, toxic environment for everyone involved. We need to give people the freedom to walk away, and when they walk away, it's typically for some serious reasons. I want to go back to the graphic I read earlier. 60% of couples cited a partner's unfaithfulness as a reason that their union ended. Nearly a quarter of divorces, 24% in total, cite domestic abuse as a cause of divorce. So these like no-fault divorces, yes, they happen, it is true. But to say that they're the main reason why couples get divorced in America is just flat out wrong. Plus, getting a divorce is difficult, as I mentioned earlier. It takes a lot of money and a lot of time. Divorces take time. Contested divorces usually take over a year to finalize. Although simple divorces can be completed in as little as 3 months, divorce comes at a big cost, with couples spending an average of $7,000 to dissolve their unions. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not like we have more people getting married today. Less people are getting married today. We don't need to give them more reasons to avoid getting married. So the marriage rate has declined from 8.2 per capita in 2000 to 6 per capita in 2021. So I don't know, again, what's fueling Tim Pool's commentary there. I think there seems to be this feeling that women are at fault here, that they're mindlessly getting married and then mindlessly demanding divorces. I don't think that's a real issue in America. I think the real issue in America is people who really have no business getting involved in the personal, intimate lives of Americans, getting involved in the personal, intimate lives of Americans. We've got real issues in America, there's no doubt about that. Let's focus on those things and maybe stay off of Americans and what they're up to in their private lives.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.